What's up, guys? Welcome to another edition of Before the Whistle presented by BRK Insurance Group. If your business is looking for the best in employee benefits, commercial property and casualty insurance, or retirement and 401k plan services, there's no one better suited to meet your challenges and build a plan centered around your needs than BRK Insurance Group. What's going on, y'all? Happy Friday. Happy game eve. Welcome back to Before the Whistle. I'm your host, Maddy Hudak, and really excited about today's guest episode. I'm bringing on WWL's Mike Detillier. He's someone that I've had on fairly often on this show over the last couple of seasons. I just think he is so insightful. He's another person like me that has an unconventional background. I believe is an aquatic engineer, but is one of the best football minds in terms of just an enriching conversation than you can ask for. And it was just really insightful to hear how he's really assessed this Tulane team over their first couple of games. You know, looking at Darian Mensah and that it factor, and really, are you able to put your finger on that? And what about him has just been super impressive. But it's not just Darian Mensah that makes this offense click. You know, we went through pretty much the entirety of how this offense starts and clicks with Ty Thompson, the creativity there, what that says about both of those guys and just their relationship with one another, just the quality of all these wide receivers. But Mike, I love talking trenches with him. I always go back to this analogy that he brought up where in training camp, it's really hard to tell what you're like on the line of scrimmage because it's basically pajamas and slippers until you really get out there and play some football. And, you know, looking at just another local team situation, the Saints, where if you lose your starting O-line, there's really not much conversation to be had. A lot of that comes from center, where Tulane loses Sincere Haynesworth, who had not missed a game since he was a starting center. That is pretty unbelievable through all 4 years of him playing. So just really how important that relationship has been to this offense as a whole. On the defensive side of the ball, again, the pass rush is just broken through in a way that people were really not expecting after the year really got started. But I'm just going to let Mike speak for himself. It's a really great episode on all things Tulane, and we'll get right into that here on Before the Whistle. All right, Mike, I'm excited to have you back on. I had you last season talking about what Tulane was able to do under Willie Fritz, but it's safe to say that the Jon Sumrall era has gone, I think, better than anyone could have expected, especially over the last 2 weeks. But what's really been your assessment of this Green Wave team this year?
Well, I knew it was going to be a transition because of the fact, okay, you have a new quarterback. He's never taken a snap in a college game before, okay? And you got a center, a new one. He did have experience, okay? So that did help that he had some time as a starter, as a player. And so you knew there would be early on some measures of good and bad. I knew the defense would be pretty good. Secondary has grown into a strength for this team. There was a lot of question marks. I know when you came on with us on WWL, it was, okay, exactly how all this is going to work out in the secondary, but that has really come along very well. So I've been impressed overall with everything that Jon has been able to do here. And I think the biggest thing we see is the growth of another star quarterback. Darian Mensah, he isn't a good player. He's going to be a star player for you. Now, the problem may be down the line to keep him, but you understand when you go most of the time from a guy like Michael Pratt, who had started, 3 years for this team, there's always a bit of a drop-off. You see Mensah, he is extremely gifted as a quarterback for someone who has never started until this year or played at the collegiate level. And I told a colleague of mine this early, and I think he may have even used it on a national broadcast because his deal was, who does he remind you of? I didn't see Jordan Love his first year at Utah State. Didn't see him. I saw him year two. And then he comes to Manning camp. And then I watched him his final season at Utah State. That's who Mensah reminds me of. Jordan Love, who's now starting for the Packers. They're built similar, throw the football similar, athletic, can move out of the pocket. But what impresses you is how accurate they are throwing from the pocket. That catches your eye. And he's so poised, Maddy. I mean, for a guy that hadn't been there, done that, okay, I got it. Give it to me. Yeah, I'm going to make mistakes. But, hey, I got it. Y'all all calm down. I'm good. So, because sometimes I think nervousness for a quarterback sort of filters down to other areas of the team. Didn't see that with Darian at all.
Yeah, not only that, but we just talked with Darian on Tuesday. Again, just speaks so poised. But I brought up the fact that after the first game, Keith Brown and Shotty Clayton Johnson, the way they spoke about him, Shotty said that he reminded him when he looked at Darian to calm down himself. So for him to not only have that effect on just his own play, but the players around him has really been incredible. And that's really what I've said. I like how you said it's not year 1 or 2 Jordan Love. It's post Manning Passing Academy, year 4 Jordan Love, Utah State that we're talking about here. I mean, you look back at Michael Pratt's first season as the quarterback for Tulane, it was nothing like what we're seeing from Darian. You're seeing just, I think, such a seasoned guy. You always hear this term, X factor. I think that's something that's gotten thrown around a lot with Darian Mensah. I think you explained what goes into that as well as anyone else, where you have to have all of the requisite traits of a quarterback. But how real do you really think that X factor is? And is it something you just can't really put your finger on, but was something that you can really see, obviously, in Mensah?
Maddy, I've done this almost 40 years. I wish I could explain what that it factor is. But when you see it. He's got it. He's got it. And while I'll get calls for upperclassmen about Tulane, first name they bring up, man, that Mensah guy is good. He is really good. And so that transition has been fairly smooth for Tulane to bring in a young guy. And you can see that there's just this link between him and the offense. But what makes an offense really roll for a young quarterback? Run the ball. Okay? If all you do is throw it, you and I can call defenses for that. But if I can run it, then I got issues. And that's what Tulane is giving them now. And, I think about Micah probably last summer. We had Willie on 3 to 4 times on WWL before the season started. He never mentioned Michael Hughes' name once. Never. He was not one of the top 3 or 4. And now he's your bell cow runner. And the fact that 6 games, over 600 yards, that's impressive. And I sort of glossed over it a little bit, but what Vincent Murphy has done at center too, because I keep repeating this, that people don't understand how difficult that position is to play. You got to know what you got to do, and then you communicating it out to the 2 guards, 2 tackles, tight end, calm down my quarterback. And here's the thing. I can't be 90% on snaps. Got to be 100. Got to be 100%. My snaps got to be right. And calling different protections, because the big change I see today from even 10 years ago, it was at one time pressure sent was off the edges.
Yeah.
Now, right up the A gap. And okay, I got this guy. You got him. I got to take care of him. They also got to have a running back that helps sometimes to chip to get that guy out, especially with a young quarterback. I'm going to try to confuse it. I'm not going to send them where I think he thinks I'm coming. Maybe I'll delay it a little bit. So what Vincent Murphy has done has been impressive too, because, man, people don't understand what Hainsworth, 4-year starter. I've seen everything. There's nothing you can show me collegiately I haven't seen. and then you can calm down the young quarterback. Because a lot of times I've seen it good and bad. Okay, everything's working. I'm excited. Hey, calm down. Turn the page. That's more chapters left to write in the book. Turn the page. And then when things go bad, what am I? Okay, calm down. Calm down. Just do what you're supposed to do. Do what you're supposed to do. But it does help you got a running game. And Hughes brings that to the table, and you're playing physical up front, and you're getting that big push. So, yeah, all of that has really worked offensively very, very well for Tulane. And the fact you're doing it with, but this is college football today. Mario Williams, okay, he was at USC last year. Okay, you're doing it with him. Now, Keith Brown was here, but Dante also was, but he really wasn't a major factor. Now Dante Fleming has become a major player for you on the offensive side of the football. Great leader. And he transitioned what we saw, so to speak, in the spring and fall practices to on the football field. Sometimes that doesn't always work. And you figure he's averaging. Mario's 18 yards a catch. Dante's 17-9. It's the same damn thing. Keith Brown, almost 15? You hitting big plays. And now you're on the verge. And I don't know how much he'll play against Rice. I think they want to give him some action, but it'll be limited. But Chaz Preston.
Yeah.
I've told you, I saw him. He played his high school ball not far from where I live at St. James. No, he was a tilt-the-field guy. He contested catch receiver, big physical, sort of had some similarities to Jarvis Landry at Letcher. That's who he sort of reminded me of as a high school player. And the 50-50 ball, it wasn't 50-50. With him, it was 90-10. I got it. So now you're bringing him into the mix here as the season gets to the midpoint and beyond. So it's looked good for them on offense, and they haven't had a ton of injuries. That really says a lot, because the one thing you don't have is a lot of depth. I don't care who you are, especially along the offensive line. I got a receiver that might be close. I might have a tight end that's close. I don't have a center, a left tackle, a left guard that's as good as my starters. And if he is, he got Zippo experience. I have no experience. That experienced guy, he went somewhere else to play. So I've been impressed with what they've done offensively. I think it'll only get better in the time frame with them. And got the right coach who has a history of his teams have progressively got better as the season has went along. And we see it. It's in front of your very eyes. You see it. I see it. Everybody does.
100%. I mean, so many good things that you just said there. The thing with the O-line depth, you don't have to look any further than what's going on with the Saints right now to just see how quickly nothing can really matter. And I've been talking about Tulane's health too. Also, the O-line getting experience because of the two dominating victories. The backups have had now over 2 quarters of meaningful football against conference opponents at this point. So that really does help. But Chaz Preston, I got to say, I don't think I've been asked as many questions about an injured player on, a pretty much weekly basis of, has he gone out there? What's going on? Just, from so many people. I think it just goes to show how exciting that really is as an additional wrinkle. I think we might, actually see maybe some limited snaps, but my thing with the hamstring, if you haven't practiced all week, I don't want someone going in cold with that type of thing. So I think that he's very, very, very close, and all things considered, he's really going to matter for this final stretch. I totally agree with you on Dante Fleming as well. I started to see it in spring, and it reminded me a little of Chris Brazzell the year before, where he looked super skinny 2 seasons before that, and then we came back. Same thing with Deuce Watson, the Cotton Bowl year, actually. But Dante Fleming, he comes back. He has a considerable more muscle. And now you're seeing it really translate on the field. They've had a different leading receiver almost every week this year. It's crazy to watch how well this offense has clicked really in all phases. But, to go back to your point about center, and again, with the Saints, when I've done the scouting academy, trying to learn those interior defensive line positions, like you just said, when someone moves just one shade to the other, it's a completely different block that you're looking for. And so it's been very impressive to me on that side. But I love talking the trenches with you. And I always go back to your pajamas and slippers thing about training camp and not being able to assess a team's pass rush. And it was really hard to kind of assess this new bandit role with a very unproven players for Tulane. And for something to have clicked, as you said, coming on strong the second half of the season, I don't think that's really shown anywhere as much as it has these last 2 weeks with Tulane's pass rush.
Maddy, the other thing too is this has become such a specialty type game. If it's not so much in the high school ranks, but college, in the pros. You had a quarterback, he thought he was coming here, this is my job, Ty Thompson. And I give the Green Wave coaches credit. I see the athleticism in him. We got to figure out a way to get him on the field. And they've done it, built that package. I don't want to say Taysom Hill-like, but there is a little bit of that in this element. He's not the power runner Taysom is, but I will say this, Ty can run. He got some speed. And
he's the fastest player on the team per their GPS.
Different style players, but for him to accept it, that, hey, I got it. Okay, wherever you need me, I'll help out. I wish I could say everybody was like that, but not everybody is. I want to be the man. I want to be the quarterback. Okay, you're not. You got beat out, but we'll find you a spot. We'll get you some touches because we think you can help us short yardage, red zone, every once in a while, putting him in there. And, okay, if I'm a defensive player and I see Ty get on the field, my first thought, it's a run. You know what I do? I let him take 2 steps back and I throw it just out in the flat. Let the receiver run under it. It don't have to be a great throw, just a good one. And I'll let Mario and I'll let Dante, Euclid, let him get under it, that throw. And so I'm impressed in what he's been able to do and accept the fact that, okay, I got a young star quarterback here. It ain't me. It's not going to be me. But I'm going to help him win. And if something happens, I'm ready. I'm ready because you one play away from changing the season. You brought about it with the Saints. Where have they been since they lost Eric McCoy and they lost Taysom Hill?
Yeah.
2 guys. That's how quickly it can change.
Yeah. And what I think is very impressive about their use of Ty Thompson is I feel like when they started to put Taysom Hill into the offense very early on as that gadget player, there was the issue of flow and kind of just it felt like the decision to take out Drew Brees at certain moments. It took a little while to, I think, really find some rhythm there. I feel as if Joe Craddock has just had a menu of plays just in case a player like this ever came about because we've seen so much creativity. You look back at that pirouette play that they ran. You could have one where they switch. You could have one where they hand off to one another. We've seen, like you said, Ty throw it. Unfortunately, didn't make that completion in that one, but then ended up throwing a touchdown later in the game. He's had now, like you said, he's probably had 3, if not 4 quarters of football at this point, playing in relief for Darian because of the blowout wins that Tulane's been able to have. Looking back on last year, I feel like, I think rankings, looking at, point margin of victory, it matters sometimes. Sometimes I think the importance is overinflated. But what I think I really appreciate this year is with Tulane's ability to dominate, you're able to get those depth players really critical experience. And that's something that last year, you talked about the health. We got to the final stretch of the season. We had some critical injuries and the guys that had to step up really had no time on task. but, just the attitude to me too. Jon Sumrall has told us that Darian Mensah and Ty Thompson go to college football or high school football games together. They're so close knit. And that just really impresses me. And I think their attitude really says a lot about this team. But, Tulane has been a defensive minded team just as much ever since I've been here. Willie Fritz and Jon Sumrall, both defensive minded head coaches. And the start of the season this year, it was a little concerning for Tulane, I think, on the defensive side of the ball. You just had so much change on that side. I'm pretty sure it was just Patrick Jenkins, Eric Hicks, Tyler Grubbs, and Bailey Despaney that came back. It's one player in your entire secondary. So having to just really get that communication down. But I've been so impressed by the young playmakers on Tulane's roster. The fact that Jack Chinchu is a freshman that transferred over, got hurt in training camp, and he's really played himself into some playing time alongside Kevin Adams. What can you really kind of say about those young guys back there?
They have stepped it up. And, okay, if you're going to lose players on defense, normally it's in the secondary. Every once in a while you get a big man hurt, but it's normally either that linebacker in the secondary. So you got young players stepping up. And this defense is built upon having to
Hold on, I lost your audio for a second. Ike? I can't hear you.
Sometimes if you don't stop the run, you don't have the right to rush the quarterback. Got to stop the run first. If you don't do it, gone. And I think that's what has gradually been better. They've been able to stop the run. And you got linebacker flow. Okay, because you look at what Tyler Grubbs has done, what Sam Howard has done. That particular deal, that they're the cornerstones of your defense right now, along with Patrick Jenkins. And you've got the young guys involved now. But I think coverage is always set when you have a situation where you can get after the quarterback and you put them in bad spots. It's 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, whatever. And you stop the run, even on 3rd and 5 now today, they throwing it. So now you got to have people that can match up in the secondary, people that can match up in the coverage part of the game. That's where the young guys have been able to step up. But before that happens, you have to have the right to play in those sets, to get after the quarterback, to get in coverages to make plays. And that is first and foremost, got to stop the run. That's what Jon has always built his teams upon. Stop the run first, and then we can get after the quarterback. Because if all you're going to do is, blitz him every play, for a quarterback, he wants you to do that every play. Because once you start, then I figure out exactly where I'm going with the ball. Exactly where I'm going with it. Now, you kind of got to time it up, and every once in a while, you got to time that blitz and send people. But you got to earn that right. And that he's brought that up on our Tulane Tuesday show with me when I brought up the fact about, getting a pass rush. And his deal has always been, I get that part. And you're right. It's about earning the right to get after the quarterback. And I think you're starting to see it with this secondary now, very confident. I can match up against receivers. You know why? I'm going up against the guys every day in practice. Every day. Those guys are pretty doggone good. Now I got to match up with other guys. They're not as good. They may not be as good as Mario. They may not be as good as Dante Fleming or Brown. They're not as good. Man, I feel confident. But if I get a pass rush, nothing affects the game more in the fourth quarter than a pass rush. But you got to earn that right to get the pass rush. And that's first and foremost stopping the run. They've been able to do a great job with it. And the older players, if it's Tyler or Sam Howard, if it's the younger players you brought up, now they're into the flow of the game. They're into the flow of it. And so I like what I've seen in what I call middle range coverage.
Mhm.
And deep coverage, sometimes you can get beat. Somebody can just put a ball out there, the receiver makes a great play, gets under the pass, or you bite on that first move and he beats you on a double move downfield. But that has progressively got better as the season goes along for a secondary that had zero playing time together. I mean, that secondary got wiped out in the offseason. So now you're bringing in transfer guys. I think that's the hardest part as a coach today is the transition part of practice with transfer young players and getting it to equate to what happens on the football field. That's a lot harder than you might think. And we see it at LSU the same way. They found kind of a combination now. Tulane found it a little quicker with that. And so, but it's part of college football world. Okay, you hope to have continuity. You can spell it, doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Exactly. And sometimes it's just, even without the transfer portal, they lost all of those guys to, the draft and beyond in that secondary. But you look back at last year, Lance Robinson, Jarius Monroe, Bailey Despaney, DJ Douglas, they had a lot of time on task together. AJ Hampton being in that fold as well. Cam Pettisflow is really the kind of dark horse MVP of all of that. He came in the second portal window, but you look at the secondary this year, like you just said, you talk about turnover, but that second wave too, Micah Robinson and Jonathan Edwards, the two starting corners, they didn't come over until that second window. They also came over from FCS programs. So the fact that they've been able to translate to this level of play in that short of a time period, and you look back at the early games against Kansas State and Oklahoma, and I hope that people really understand how impressive it was, how Tulane was able to play against those teams, because you talk about no time on task. Jack Chinchu and Kevin Adams, they had incredible playing time in that game. Bailey Despaney, after he had 12 tackles in a quarter against Oklahoma, is ejected for targeting. And all of a sudden, all these guys have to play against real SEC guys. So you talk about, like you said, not just playing against Mario Williams and Dante Fleming in practice, but that competition, to me, it's going to matter. And it's just been showing in their ability to dominate. But like you said, I noticed that right before the pass rush broke through, they had to use a lot of linebacker blitzing. That unfortunately then leaves your second level a little more vulnerable. They brought back a consultant, Mike Storms, who works with hand combat. He's, a former Marine, a karate belt, a 9th degree black belt or something like that. How important really is, that use of hands on the defensive line, and just really what's impressed you the most about the pass rush in the last couple of weeks?
It's paramount. Leverage and hand usage. And I'm good friends with Pete Jenkins, all of 83 years old, maybe the greatest defensive line coach ever. And he's all about techniques, leverage, hand usage. And he will always tell a young player, okay, you've come trained with me. Find somebody that knows MMA boxing, karate, jiu-jitsu, you name it, and go work with them on your hands. Because that is so important with a move, double move, and using your hands. Because a lot of times linemen today, they sort of watch your waist and where you're going to go. But if you can kind of move with your hands and get around them, then that's so important. So I think that's critical. Other than the leverage part of the game and having a counter move to a move, that ability to use your arms and your hands, it is at the very top. And you see it so much better after they've done it, because now they got confidence with it. Okay, it does apply in something else, but it applies to what I'm doing now. But sometimes it takes somebody to get it through their head that it does, and that it does work. It does help you. So the hand usage for a defensive lineman is at the very top of what you want to get better. And I would say the same thing at linebacker, because you're getting kind of second level blocking. what you would like to have is your defensive lineman sort of collapse and you get a run to the ball carrier. But a lot of times that's heavy traffic. So you got to get around a much bigger guy than you. Okay, a linebacker, I'm 225, 230 at the most. I'm trying to get up the field, and they got a 320-pound guy. Can't match him strength-wise. But when I can't match him, I get my hands on him. I can maybe get around him. It's not about mano a mano, I'm going to take you on. I'm going to be a tough guy. You do that, you're going to lose 95% of the time. But that big guy, he might not be able to move as well as you. So if I can get my hands on him and sort of move him around and think I'm going left and I go right, think I'm going right, I go left, works perfect. That's where working with somebody who has been involved with karate or judo comes into play, because all your opponents are not going to be the same size. Okay, this ain't Seinfeld with Kramer beating up on little kids. Okay, the little kid might be you because of the lineman that you have to beat. So I think it's a huge help for linemen and linebackers to be able to work with someone. And I know Pete, he's a big advocate of it. And okay, he's a lot older than me, and he's adjusted to that part of the game. You've got to get better with your arms and your hands.
Yeah, without question. And again, he came back on as a consultant right before the USF game. And then I think Tulane had 6 sacks in that game, if I'm not mistaken. And just the way they were sacking the UAB quarterback, it was, it feels like they're playing bully ball now. So I think really for them, if anything, the challenge this week, to me, their only thing standing in their way is really Tulane beating Tulane at this point. I feel like coming into this year, there was nothing really proven about this team. And we were talking about 2 completely different quarterbacks in a competition for the majority of the offseason. But really at this point moving forward, what's really kind of the most important thing for Tulane if they really want to keep making this run?
Well, keep your focus. You are better than Rice. They got one hell of a running back. That Connor, pretty good. So I joked with John. I said, I know he didn't get to Texas driving here, okay, because he's from Hawaii. So yeah, but that's part of the world we live in today. That a guy from Hawaii ends up at Rice, and he's their best player offensively, no question. Runner and a receiver.
Yeah,
he is very effective catching the ball coming out of the backfield. So one of the things I would try to do against a guy like that is not always have a linebacker on him, because he's going to beat that linebacker eventually. Maybe get a safety, a nickel back that can go up against Connor, because he is really, really good. But I always think about every game is like if you had a camera, an old camera, and you took a snapshot and you waited 5 minutes and you just turned and you snap it again. It doesn't look the same. Nothing stays the same. So it's the ability to move your team like the camera. Even though it's 5 minutes, you got another pitcher, another pitcher, another pitcher. So that's the challenge. And you got some pretty tough opponents down the road that you have to play. Memphis, those academy schools have played pretty well this year too. Shocking how good. And the hardest challenge, if you play an Army or a Navy, is you don't see that offense much. So you got a couple days to practice how to stop it. And how they catch you a little bit is you haven't seen it, and I'm going to keep feeding it to you. Now, Navy's more aggressive throwing the ball than Army is. But you don't see that offense, and they've had to learn how to reblock, because now the rules committee came in and said, well, you can't block, below the knees and all this. So now they just aim it a little bit higher. They are effective, very effective. The other part, too, and I'm a big believer in this, and I talked to Coach Sumrall about this a few weeks back, and he said, boy, you're right about this part, special teams. An ability to make big plays on special teams, because sometimes your offense might not be clicking. And having covered college and pro football for, again, basically 40 years, nothing gets a crowd more whipped up. Return, punt, return, kickoff return. Defensive scores is in that category too. But a punt kick return fires up everybody. And they've won that part of the game. And, okay, Rashawn, he's been a difference maker. And when he gets the ball in his hands, it's like, he's gone with it. If it's an interception, if it's a return, I think, Maddy, that is something to watch as this season progresses and you play teams that look a little differently. Can you win? Not come out even, win special teams. And make sure the snap is right. You know what I mean?
Well, I'll always be sure to be on Ethan Hudak about that. Awesome. All right, y'all. Again, that was WWL Radio's Mike Detillier. Just one of the favorite conversations I always have, with just a great mind and someone that's really, really tapped in to the Tulane football program. Whenever I go on all of those radio shows, it just has felt really different on all appearances, just how much attention this team has really demanded that people pay towards them. But just to have all of that insight about really what makes a team build, what makes a team click, it goes really just to the heart of this show before the whistle, of how much really, off the field preparation, communication, chemistry goes into it, where, by the time you get to stats, there's just so much context here to be had. But I think it just colors a really impressive picture for Tulane on both sides of the football. How, one of my favorite things about Tulane's defense all seasons as sideline reporter is how much the secondary loves stopping the run. And that is something that is a trait that very much is continued under Jon Sumrall. Again, being a defensive-minded head coach, you want your defense to be a point of strength. And I think Tulane is really turning the tide there over these last couple of games. But Rice, this is a game where you are actually going to see a real test for Tulane. I think that the USF game, that was still just very surprising to everyone. But as I've said, UAB, they are in a downward spiral. It is what it is. Rice is the antithesis of that. You look back at the Charlotte game, they had a pretty credible comeback, miss a 40-yard field goal at the end, should have won. It's a 1-point loss. And then they end up beating UTSA last week. But you really have to pay attention to Dean Connors in this matchup. There was LeJonte Wester for FAU last year for Tulane. Just in terms of a memory of, you shut down that one player, then you have to make him beat you in any other way. It's very Bill Belichickian, where that's kind of what that philosophy is just don't let a team beat you with their best player, make them beat you with their weaknesses. And so that's going to be just a really intriguing point. And I think he brought up something important as well, where, the linebackers, it's going to be a tough day for them, because he's also their leading receiver. He has 34 receptions this year, which also leads FBS running backs, third all time in Rice's history. He had his first 100-yard receiving game last week against UTSA. Now, granted, that also included a 69-yard touchdown reception. So not that much outside of that in terms of yardage, but that, explosive plays, that'll make football games go haywire really quickly. I think Tulane has cleaned that up as the weeks have gone on, but there's still been just some moments here and there in all of these games. But this one, that could be a difference maker for them. I also appreciated, him bringing up special teams. That's something that I was thinking in my head. I want to just have an episode where I really kind of do a little more deep dive on that specifically, because I don't think it's gotten the attention it's deserved. And really going from what Jon Sumrall called abysmal coverage in week one to one of the most exciting, again, Rashawn Pleasant in college football. Just, he leads the nation in touchdown returns. And that's between punts and kickoffs. He also leads in average, I think, 44.7 yards per return. Here's the really incredible part. He didn't start returning punts until week 4. So that's just been 3 games, if I can do math, of production for him. It's been really incredible. The kicking situation, and you have Jacob Barnes back there, it's stabilized. You have Shout out to Ethan Hudak, one of the most stable long snapper situations. It's been consistent all of the time that I've been there. It's all led by Greg McMahon. That to me is really where the importance is here. And it's an important phase for Tulane. And as Mike pointed out, it could really be an important one this Saturday. I think Tulane should be able to handle business, but this is a game where Jon Sumrall has really emphasized the importance of not overlooking this opponent. It's a team he really respects, thinks is well coached. And listen, they lead the conference. They're top 10 in the country with 20 sacks and 49 tackles for loss. That cannot be sneezed at. That is a lot of production in just a short time here. And so protecting Darian Mensah, keeping him upright, letting Mekhi Hughes and co really just eat up the clock and take us down to another victory. That'll be great. And I'll see you guys for our post-game recap on Tuesday.